My name is Jeanette Jeneault, and I teach at Syracuse University in the writing program. I recently received my 20-year pin. I'd like to tell you how I became involved in faculty activism. I was working at a community college in their English department. I had been there about 8 years. There was a new contract that was agreed to by probably most of the union, the executive committee or whoever was in charge. I do know that despite the fact that most of the people that taught there were part-time, there wasn't any part-time representation in the leadership of the union. So when they negotiated the contract, they did get us very nice raises that were across the board for everyone. However, what they did do was they made it possible for them to tell us what textbooks we were going to use, and also they came up with a new way to assign courses, wherein 1 week before the classes would start, we would stand in a line based on our seniority. We would be organized as such, and we would be called into a room and be given the list of courses that were still open, and we could decide on 2. And then if we wanted a 3rd course, we would have to get back in line all the way at the end of everyone that was in the line. Well, I said, I don't like that idea very much. And as a matter of fact, Mr. President of the union, I said, you know what? If all the part-time instructors on campus voted against this contract, it would go down. And he said, try. So I did. Then I realized how difficult it was to organize part-time faculty, because none of the part-time faculty on that campus had offices. And the only way that I could contact them was perhaps through their mailboxes, but they weren't identified in the individual departments. So I had to ask around a lot. Hi, are you a faculty member here? I just noticed that you were carrying a briefcase. Are you a part-time faculty member or a full-time faculty member? You should vote against the contract, and here's why. Well, it was probably a contract that had more no votes than any of the previous contracts, but of course it went through. I refused to stand in line. They call it the slave auction, actually. The adjuncts do there now. It's still going on. And I decided to resign my position there, and I eventually decided to only work at one college and try to make my living that way. But eventually I went to what I called the one school rule. The way that the one school rule would work is only if the wages were raised and that there were other opportunities for me to make money on that single campus. And during this time, someone asked me if I wanted to participate in Campus Equity Week, and I said I definitely do. And that's how it began. We had the salaries raised from whatever they felt like paying people to a minimum of $1,000 a credit hour. A couple years after that, we had the regular part-time faculty raised to $14.50 a credit hour. So this was a great amount of progress without even unionization. But we still were facing a lot of capriciousness on the part of the administration regarding renewal of contracts, etc. So we realized that we had to unionize. The unionization process was a very long and difficult one. It was the 3rd try for part-time faculty on our campus to unionize, but this time it stuck. And I decided, although I was trying to give people even weighted information before they voted about whether to unionize or not, I decided after the fact that I would run for president, because when I went to the meetings where we were talking about what issues were important, people started saying, Jeanette for president. So, and I also was the person that people identified with as this is who you go to. I was on the university senate. I was on key committees. And I was always trying to bring contingent faculty issues to the forefront, including full-time contingent faculty issues, which are still sort of in that limbo in the case of Syracuse University. They can just non-renew them, and they don't really have to give them any reasons. So since it began, I've been the president of Adjuncts United. We have our first contract. It took us 2 years to negotiate it. It took us 81 meetings, 8 with a federal mediator. Those were very long meetings. It took a great deal of patience, and sometimes we had to mix the sides of the table together to come up with solutions when we hit walls. And I think that what we ended up with was a pretty good contract, because now we have just cause. We have many of the things, in writing that we didn't have before. So it's going to be harder to get rid of us simply because they don't like us or they don't like what we say. And a lot of people ask me, aren't you afraid that you're making yourself a target by being the one that speaks up? And I always tell them, the people that speak up, those are the ones that have the best case if something happens. You just have to make sure that you always meet your obligations in terms of faculty requirements. Try to be the best teacher that you can be. Try to do your work on time. Never miss your office hours. Don't have students going to the department secretary saying, "Where is Professor Jeneault? She's not at her office hour." Don't let that happen. Really follow the rules, and there really isn't that much that they can do. I like being a faculty member. I love teaching. I love helping other faculty. And I think that you need to have people that are willing to do the hard work. Even though we do have a contract now and we have a lot of benefits for part-time faculty, across the board, it's still really hard to organize part-time faculty because they're busy. They tend to work at multiple institutions because now people are thinking, I can actually maybe buy a house someday. Things like that maybe they couldn't do before. A lot of people ask me what's the big deal about the AAUP? And I'm like, well, did you ever hear of tenure? Did you ever hear of academic freedom? Well, there wouldn't be tenure and academic freedom without the AAUP. And some contingent faculty members say, why are you supportive of tenure? And I said, tenure is the foundation of higher education. In fact, one of the things that the university was surprised to learn was that I hoped that there would be fewer contingent faculty instead of more. They said, how odd. Why would you want that? And I said, well, if you had fewer contingent faculty, they could teach more courses. They could maybe do other tasks for the university. They could be paid a living wage. They could have benefits. They would be a more stable workforce. You'd be able to give everyone an office that needed one. I've always had one. But there are some places that you don't, or there's one office and you walk into it and you're trying to find one person and you might see 8 people around a round table trying to grade papers, and then there's little cubicles and there must be 25 people in there, and it's about 85 degrees, and you're thinking, oh, this is horrible. But just think if they consolidated those positions and made them so they'd be benefits eligible and long-term appointments. And, of course, they would have the just cause provisions and the chance for remediation and all this. Then there wouldn't be such a high turnover rate. There would be a more stable workforce. Students would be able to find these people because you could say, well, as part of your contract, we want you to do 5 office hours a week, as opposed to a half an hour per course, which I find is not adequate. It never is. I try to remind everyone that it's not a zero-sum game. I try to talk to as many of the tenure track faculty as I can to make them realize that the more they bring up the wages and the conditions of the part-time faculty, the more likely they're going to realize that it's probably pretty cost-effective to have a tenure track person. And my goal at Syracuse University is that there will be more tenure track lines that will open up. And some of those will be filled by people that are in my bargaining unit. That's great. That's definitely a possibility, and it has occurred. And I hope that will continue to occur.